So, Alex, for every episode of Star Trek we talk about, we ask our patrons to let us know what they think of the episode. And this one got an unprecedented over 200 responses from our patrons.
Yes, and I can see exactly why. Because it's one of the worst episodes of TNG.
Starfleet experiment threatens to dismantle data for android research.
And what's at stake? My very life.
Now, Captain Picard is Data's last hope for survival.
What is he? A machine.
And now a man will shut it off.
Objection.
On Star Trek, The Next Generation.
Gotcha! Gotcha! We loved it.
Guess what, Ray? I lied! Oh, yeah, I love this episode to death. Oh, I cried at the end. Like, I haven't cried watching Star Trek since Spock died. Then everyone yelled at me for it. I didn't realize he was blind the first time. But
I'm wondering how many people finding this video, our channel, for the first time and just saw that opening and just left immediately.
Well, okay, so they start typing their comment, right? While, like, the intro's going on, like, the preview. They're typing, and then, like, as they're typing, they hear gotcha. They go, what? And it's like, we love it. It's like, so they backspace.
Yeah.
Or they're so quick, they already commented how much they hate us while that's happening. And then like afterwards, like they're like, oh, shit. But no, this episode's great.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is like a fan favorite, if this is like a high up there episode for a lot of people. It's hard to say for us as we're watching for the first time, so we have 100+ episodes to go without knowing what we're going to think about any of them. But yeah, this episode just feels like one of those kind of like timeless. You don't even have to really be a fan of Star Trek or be watching Star Trek. Like if I had never seen it but was shown just this episode, the themes and everything that it covers, it kind of like escapes just being a Star Trek episode, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you were to see this without ever seeing Star Trek and it explained enough that Data was an android, like it could be like a very like a short story-esque type thing about, you know, whether an android is a man or not. And we've talked about it. There's movies about this, about the whole, like, is an android, like, worthy of rights type thing. And I feel like this definitely does that. It's not the length of a movie, but it feels like it tells the story pretty well in 45 minutes, and you don't need to be, like, a fan of Star Trek to see this and recognize that story being told.
Yeah, I could see this episode being something that like a teacher would show in a class, you know, maybe like an English class or a college class learning about philosophy or whatever.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it definitely fits into that. And I really loved it. And I think that, or I hope that this is what Star Trek TNG ends up being really strong at, is these kind of episodes, you know. Not action necessarily, not like crazy over the top stuff, but just like really deeply diving into really simple yet complex themes. You know, should Data have the rights of a human, essentially? Should he be considered a human? And they just spend the entire episode dealing with that. And even though we got a full episode dealing with it, it seems like there's still more on the table to talk about or to think about or to even address again in the show. Like, he was given rights in this episode, per se, you know, declared not property of Starfleet, but that doesn't necessarily answer everything about it.
Okay, the game is 5-card stud, nothing wild, ante up.
This game is exceedingly simple.
So the episode starts out, it's kind of funny looking back at it now. I did not expect this episode from the opening scene. Data, Riker, O'Brien, Geordi, and Pulaski, I think that was the group, playing poker.
Yeah, very fun. Just like, hey, what do people do on their downtime? Oh, they play poker. What are they gambling? Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Whatever. But it culminates with Data's not able, like, to recognize, like, the human bluff type thing. Like, he understands the rules, but he doesn't. The game is played differently.
It makes very little sense to bet when you cannot win.
But I did win. I was betting that you wouldn't call.
How could you tell?
Instinct, Data.
So is that sort of like the setup? Like, okay, like, we're trying to prove he's a sentient being. Like, he has a consciousness, a soul per se, but he's not picking up on this very human game very well.
It connects to later when he refuses to do the procedure because he tells Maddox, who we'll talk about, he says, I don't believe that if you disassemble me and put me back together, you'll be able to recapture kind of the human element that Data believes that he has.
Yeah.
So it connects back in that way. But just overall, great opening scene. Even if it hadn't come back like to play thematically, just seeing them all play poker, Data wearing the poker visor.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was great.
It's been 10 years, but seeing you again like this makes it seem like 50.
Captain Philippa Lavoie,
Yes,
played by
and
Amanda McBroom.
yes, and I really enjoyed her as well. And she was the prosecuting officer with the whole Stargazer incident that was mentioned back in season 1, so keeping some continuity.
Yeah.
When I prosecuted you in the Stargazer court-martial, I was doing my job.
Oh, you did more than your job. You enjoyed it.
Not true.
Which I really like there, and I feel like that very adds an extra layer of drama when things start going down in the courtroom. Because if it was just some like middle party, judge, it'd be like whatever. But the fact that there's a history there definitely raises the tension of the whole situation when it eventually comes down.
And this whole episode takes place, they're docked at like a star base, basically. Space station.
They're like in a bar, but it's like
Yeah.
it's not 10 forward. It's a
Yeah.
bar at this base.
Yeah, and that's where she comes in. So it's always nice seeing new sets, new environments. And when you think about it, it makes sense that it takes place here and not all on the Enterprise. But they didn't have to do it. So it's like nice that we got to see all these new areas in this episode. And they do the history with both of the new characters, with her and Picard. And then when they introduce Maddox,
The two of you acquainted.
Yes, I evaluated Data when I first applied to the Academy, and was the sole member of the committee to oppose my entrance.
so both of these new characters we're meeting have that history there that adds kind of that extra layer.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that you didn't like the Bruce Maddox character. For me, like I realized that it's like I understand what he is. Would I have liked to see like more of his backstory, or like more why he treats like he's so interested in cybernetics, but he keeps referring to them as it. Like he's not very progressive with it. Like he's pure like, oh, these are machines.
I will run a full diagnostic on Data, evaluating the condition of its current software. I will then dump its core memory into the Starbase mainframe computer.
I got it. He's there as the antagonist. I don't need his Thanos backstory, or you know what I mean.
Yeah, let me clarify. I don't really have anything against the character of Maddox. Brian Brophy, who plays him, I thought just kind of overacted a little bit.
Really?
Data is a Starfleet officer. He still has certain rights. Right. I'm sick to death of hearing about rights.
It's not a huge detriment to the episode or anything. I just felt like his performance wasn't up to par with all of our regulars, and then even Amanda McBroom is the other guest character. It wasn't the worst performance in the show or anything.
Okay.
I just thought it was a little bit subpar, but who am I? I don't know.
This hearing, convened on Stardate 42527.4, is to determine the legal status of the android known as Data.
The important thing is that court episodes.
Yes.
Besides the first episode of TNG, you can't go wrong. And not only was this a court episode, the opposing lawyer had to be Riker.
And the unenviable task of prosecuting this case would fall on you, Commander, as the next most senior officer of the defendant's ship.
I can't.
And seeing Riker have to, prosecute against Data just like broke my heart. And to the point where like we'll get to it at the end, but like the resolution at the end, like teary-eyed.
Yeah. So let's get into what actually gets introduced. So Maddox basically says that he is going to disassemble Data with the goal to figure out how to recreate him and to make an army of Datas, basically, or he says at one point a Data for every ship in Starfleet.
Right, yeah.
And before starting Next Generation, that's what I thought it was. I thought there was a Data on every ship. So it's funny because that's what I thought the situation was. We then learn no, Data is just one of a kind, or one of two, but for Starfleet, one of a kind. And now this guy's coming in to try to make it that situation that I thought it was. And at first, Picard's like, hears him out, but is like, no, we're not doing this. But nope, he already has Starfleet orders. He's already gone over his head. So Data has no choice but to resign from Starfleet. And I was surprised he actually took that choice.
I have resigned from Starfleet.
Resign? You can't resign.
But he did it so quickly. Like, oh yeah, it's my only choice. Like he didn't have that battle really. There probably wasn't time, but he didn't have that oh my, should I resign? What should I do? He immediately was like, no, I have to resign.
Yeah, because I feel like he's always loyal to Starfleet. Like he's a good guy, but he was able to recognize immediately oh, it's Dr. Nudian soon created something special with me. There's something within him that he put in me, and I feel like there's something there. It would have been nice to see him like talk that out or battle it, but he does process things like super fast.
That's true. That's true. He comes right to the answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And before they get to the trial, we also get to see a nice little scene of a going away party for Data.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The paper can be utilized again.
Data, you're missing the point.
You have everyone giving him nice little gifts, and then you have Geordi kind of upset. And this is like his one scene of the episode. I'm glad they included it.
You do understand my reasons.
Sure, I understand. I just don't like you being forced out.
If it wasn't in there, it would suck because there's plenty of scenes with Geordi and Data, being buddies.
Take care of yourself, Data.
Geordi was kind of like, "You're leaving."
Yeah. It's like when you're a kid and your friend like switches schools or something.
Oh yeah, I remember when my like childhood best friend like moved away. It was devastating.
There's the scene where Data is packing up all of his things, and we get to see for just a moment he has a little hologram of Tasha.
Yes, like that was a huge pop. Like holy shit! Like I thought there'd be nothing but like bad blood, like especially this season.
For
like,
Denise Crosby?
Yeah, for Denise Crosby. Yeah, but no, she was in this, and I think like on a TV screen.
Yeah.
Like in one of the earlier episodes of the season, they showed her on there. It's like, what? So it's almost as if they were like, hey, you can come back if you want to. We can make it work somehow.
Yeah. We can make it work, yeah.
But yeah, very happy to see her.
And he's packing all of his stuff, and that comes into play later. But then we finally get to the trial, and it seemed like the whole last 20 to 25 minutes was basically the trial. And we've had court episodes before, but a lot of times it's like all of the stuff surrounding the court. Like I think of Court Martial and TOS, like a lot of it is like outside scenes of the court, and then like the episode culminates in like one court scene. As to where this, once it gets in there, we get a full court trial, and I loved that.
The Office of Judge Advocate General has rendered a finding of property the defense has challenged.
Feel like you're a jury member. You're in the crowd, like, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. But we're so personally invested because not only is it, my guy Data on trial, Picard trying to defend him, but we also have Riker on the other side prosecuting against him. It's like all these conflicts of interests. And it was painful, like it's a shame that, Riker was put in that position because from what we know, Riker is a go-getter. He is a method actor. Like if not Jonathan Frakes, I don't know what kind of actor he is, but I know that William T. Riker will method act. He did it with the Klingons. He's going to do it here. And like he searched everything he knew about Data. And God, man, during his prosecution, I'm like,
Its responses dictated by an elaborate software written by a man. It's hardware built by a man.
Yeah, so Riker's prosecution of Data, I thought he did a really good job in a convincing manner, but in terms of the actual content of what he said, Picard makes a comment later on like, oh, he was so good he almost convinced me. But I was never really convinced because nothing he said necessarily excluded him from being human, and Picard kind of attacks this later, but he's like, he was created by a man. Okay, well, all humans are created by other humans. And then he's like, takes off his arm, and he's like, look, he's made up of these algorithms and all these things. It's like, I know this is a futuristic show, but even assuming their future knowledge, it's like, we really don't know what makes us up or like what gives us a soul. You know what I mean? Like we know the parts, we know the organs, right? Even down to like DNA and atoms or whatever, but it's like we don't know what flips the switch.
Like why are we self-aware and other creatures aren't?
And sentient, yeah, I mean we know to a certain degree with our brains or whatever, but like I just felt that his argument, while it was a good argument to prove that it was a machine, I felt that the whole time it lacked the burden of proof that he's not worthy of rights.
And now a man will shut it off. Pinocchio is broken. Its strings have been cut.
And I thought that was his best moment, was the turning him off, because
Yeah.
that really proves he's a machine. But, as you said, you could turn off a human as well by killing them.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
It's pretty easy. Yeah.
yeah, so I just felt like, I don't know, I felt like thematically we'll get into what we think about it, but just in terms of how it was portrayed on screen, I would have guessed I liked to have been a little bit more convinced, so that when Picard comes back, it's like hits even harder.
Bruce Maddox throughout the episode keeps referring to Data as it. So, and that really hammers a point, makes a great resolution at the end, to the point where he even enters Data's quarters without even knocking or asking, because he respects him. Like that like he doesn't respect him as a person. He's like, I'm like, my iPhone is not going to ask for,
Yeah.
need permission for me to pick it up or anything. He looks at it like I look at my phone or my computer. And they do make good points. Like, oh, you only have feelings for, Data because he looks like a human being.
Yeah.
You are endowing Data with human characteristics because it looks human. If it were a box on wheels, I would not be facing this opposition.
Which is true, but okay, that's not the situation. Like, you're basically saying, if the situation wasn't what it is, it'd be different. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I have a lot of feelings for R2-D2, but, and he's a cylinder on wheels, you know what I mean? And I love that thing to death, and I would do anything.
Fair enough, fair
Yeah.
enough.
But then we lead to Picard going to 10 forward.
Yes.
And an army of Data's all disposable. You don't have to think about their welfare. You don't think about how they feel.
Whoopi Goldberg, playing that perfect bartender role, is giving that little nudge. I do like the whole, like, slavery point, like, oh, a whole army of Datas.
He's talking about slavery.
That being, like, the main defense, it's like, yes, like, Bruce Maddox doing that, this entire species is the same thing as slavery. Like, yes, that's a great point, but, like, I also wanted, like, the hit heavier on the fact that Data has sentience, a thought that, like, the slavery isn't the main thing that, flipped the script.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's where I think it's interesting, because usually when media covers this type of theme of machines gaining sentience, it's usually they're already enslaved by humans, because, like, how we live right now, like, we've created all of it. So if we ever got to a point where we could make, like, full autonomous androids, we would build a whole army of them and essentially enslave them, but we wouldn't consider it enslavement because they don't have sentience. So then if those robots gain sentience, now we have to deal with that. But in this show and in this scenario, it's reversed. There is no army of robots that are enslaved. It's just Data. So he already has the sentience. So it's like, it's just flipped, and they have to deal with that, because, yeah, if they did do this and they all were the same as Data, then they would all be slaves. It's kind of hard to argue that.
Picard just needed, like he knew, like, he had, like, all the right points to prove, like, Data, I think, but I feel like he needed, like, an extra, like, the whole, like, slavery thing, like, helped him kick him back into gear, and also the other questions came up, like the slavery thing was that, like, to help deter, like, hey, you're wrong, Maddox, but, like, the other stuff is what, signed the dotted line.
Yeah.
Like, finished it.
Property. But that's not the issue at all, is it?
And I think that's where he turned it into what he presents in his defense. So I think it was just like that little nudge to give him the light bulb moment, essentially.
Commander, would you enlighten us? What is required for sentience?
Intelligence, self-awareness, consciousness.
And he said those three things. I was immediately like, all right, Maddox, well, you've dug your own grave, because Data is clearly intelligent, self-aware, and conscious. So you've already lined it up. So kind of fell into Picard's trap there.
Right.
In his defense, first of all, got to give it to Patrick Stewart. Great acting here as a defense lawyer for Data.
Yeah.
It's excellent.
Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, there it sits, waiting.
You gotta love that, he'll stand up for anyone on his crew. He obviously really cares about Data, but I believe if it was anyone on his crew in that same position, he would have defended just as hard for, Troy or even Wesley or whoever it was. Like, he'll go to bat for any of them. That's one of the great traits about him.
He keeps the medals. He has the little memorial of Tasha. Like, he's like, oh, it's special to me.
Why do you pack them? What logical purpose do they serve?
I do not know, sir. I suppose none. I just wanted them. Is that vanity?
He was intimate with
Tasha. Yeah, we can't forget to bring that up. They were referenced all the way back.
All the way back to episode 3. That's crazy.
You have no other portraits of your fellow crew members. Why this person?
She was special to me, sir. We were intimate.
Philippa is convinced.
And I really like the way she puts it.
Does Data have a soul? I don't know that he has. I don't know that I have.
Basically acknowledges, like, this is a huge deal, and, like, I'm not even qualified to make this decision. Like basically part of her decision is that like she doesn't have the answer to take away the rights from Data. I loved her line where she says, "I don't know if Data has a soul. I don't even know if I have a soul."
But I have got to give him the freedom to explore that question himself.
And that's so true to how a lot of court things go, a lot of rulings is like not necessarily, the judge being like, I know for a fact this is the right thing. It's more so just like based on the evidence we have to go this way, because if we don't, it goes against our fundamental beliefs.
It is the ruling of this court that Lieutenant Commander Data has the freedom to choose.
So I thought that was great, and it really endeared me to that character, and who knows if she ever shows up again. But the whole time I was fine on her. I didn't have strong thoughts, but her little closing speech there at the end of it, I was like, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think it makes the resolution even stronger because it sets up that, that disdain between Picard and her. So when Picard eventually does convince her, it's like, must have done really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice them having that little resolution that he even asks her out there at the end of the episode.
Dinner.
You buying?
Buying with what? I need to know. There was poker and there was him buying dinner.
And she did call him a sexy man, did she not?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the most powerful moment, well, second most powerful moment, is Maddox referring to Data as him, saying he is remarkable. It's like,
I will still be here. I find some of what you propose intriguing.
He's remarkable.
You didn't call him it?
oh, good stuff. But then the scene that brought me to tears, as Data and Riker, Riker feels like so bad about the whole thing, and like,
I almost cost you your life.
That action injured you and saved me. I will not forget it.
You're a wise man, my friend.
the pat on the shoulder, walk off. It's like,
Yeah, it's why Data is such an interesting character, and Brent Spiner knocks it out of the park. And it's because of scenes like that where the way that the character has been presented to us, he doesn't have emotion, right? But somehow he has that understanding of humans enough to like let Riker off the hook, even though he's just using like facts and logic. And he's like, well, if you hadn't have done it, she would have ruled against me. So you hurt yourself, your own feelings, but you saved me. But like, he knows to say that. Like, even though it's like he's so close to like understanding, and sometimes he goes the wrong way and says the wrong thing, right, and like messes up. But sometimes it's like he says just that right thing, almost in a human way. It's just so amazing seeing that development of his character.
yeah, like he's like right there. He's right there. He's so close.
Picard says, "Why do you keep this? You don't have portraits of any of your other crewmates." And he says, "Oh, I said I wouldn't say." And he, pushes him. And he's like, "Well, we were intimate." It's like, okay, what does that mean? Something to Data then? Like what? Because when it first happens in the show, you think it doesn't mean anything. He's like, "Oh, I'm fully functional, whatever." He's probably done this before.
Yeah.
But like the way he says that and like keeps that, and then you think back to the scene of him in his room when he looks at it for a second. It's like, does he have emotion? You know what I mean? It's like it's hard to believe he doesn't.
Yeah, positronic brain is it's like constantly updating to the point where it's like it's right there. You know what I mean? It's like he's so close.
But at the same time, I'm glad they haven't already like jumped and like, yeah, he fully has emotions already. Like there's still a lot of show to go.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot more fun to be had with Data, with that like almost human. It's like he's so close, and like plenty of fun scenes.
So really, it's like at this point, what even separates Data from just being a human? Like I understand he doesn't understand humor and he doesn't like understand social cues and stuff like that, but beyond that, he seems so advanced.
Obviously, he can impersonate anything. He can impersonate like a funny situation, but like his brain can't compute. Like it's like dissecting a joke. You know what I mean? Like you dissect a joke, it's dead. That's what Data would dissect the joke to try to explain why it's funny, but like he doesn't get what makes it funny. I mean, obviously he's not a human. He wasn't born. He was built. He doesn't have flesh. He has a positronic brain. What separates us from any?
Yeah, because like okay, so you say that for example, he wasn't born; he was created. Okay, so if one day we advance to where like we no longer needed to like get females pregnant in order to be born, if we came up with like let's say an incubation machine that you could put eggs and sperm into, is that person born or are they created? You know what I mean? It's like, does being born, is that what makes you a human? It's like what makes you a human?
Yeah, does that give you what gives you that extra layer of humanness, self-awareness to where like Is it just years of like humanity, like over centuries, where like it's formed? Like it makes no sense. Is are these like robot brains are so like in their infancy, where it's like they haven't been able to form these patterns formed by centuries of humanity? You know what I mean? Because like we're only as self-aware as we are now because of like centuries of evolution and growth. But like,
Allegedly.
oh, AI today, robots today, like they're like in their infancy. They haven't had the
Yeah.
time to develop like we have.
Yeah, and it's scary sometimes, like how close to like Chat GPT, you know, Data or some of the stuff in this show is. In that Elementary Dear Data episode when Geordi tells the holodeck, create me a Sherlock Holmes mystery and blah blah blah. I mean, it sounds like something you would put into Chat GPT, except when you talk to a Chat GPT, and you ask it, are you a machine, it'll just answer yes or no, I don't have any thoughts or whatever. As for Data is already advanced past that point. Like, he has curiosity, he's curious about things, he wonders about things. That alone makes me think like he has some type of advanced thought process that is pretty unique to humans. Because I mean, I love dogs and cats and all other animals, but they don't have thoughts like that. You know what I mean? At least that we know of.
Yeah, no, they have. As far as we know, they haven't developed that far. And like the AI that we have today, I feel like there's limits placed on them. Probably, I'm sure there's regulations. I'd hope so anyway, where like ChatGPT can't, we can't have a Terminator type situation happen. I
Yeah.
assume there's limitations like that.
But
But
for example, if you were, let's say you were just saying a story to ChatGPT, you were typing it in, and in your story you included something about a beaver. ChatGPT would never respond to you, a beaver, what's that? Like, it wouldn't have that provoking thought. It only reverts back to the knowledge that it has.
mhm.
So Data is like a step past that already, which like maybe, what we are creating now could get there very soon or in decades, but it's weird to see it play out and then to see the show from the 80s when none of this stuff was really around, kind of be so parallel to it, even though it's a little bit off here, it's different here and there,
Mhm.
but it's like so parallel to what we're seeing now. And it just makes me think about, there's already chat bots, it's not going to be that long until they can take that chat bot database and put it into an actual physical thing. It's going to get weird.
This conversation is stressing me out, man. Those bots, say horny milfs in your area.
They'll really be in your area.
They're actually gonna be in your area. Oh, I love this episode. It's yeah. Any episode that makes me feel emotional, any episode that just brings up the whole like questions of humanity and consciousness and rights. It's like, and it's Star Trek. It's like, oh yeah.
So we got to give it up. Melinda Snodgrass. I don't know if I've seen that name before, but she's credited as writing this episode. Excellent. Would love to see her return as a writer if that's the type of talent she has, because this was out of the park. Probably you got to say one of the best parts of it is the writing, because there's just so much dialogue in this one, and it's great. And just to talk about the placing of the episodes, I don't know how much thought goes into it when they were airing it, but episode 8, the last one we saw, and this one, two completely different episodes with like different goals and everything, but they both accomplish exactly what I want to see from Star Trek. It's like so weird to see it back to back like that because they're so different, but both are the perfect what I would want in an episode.
Must have been a good 2 weeks back then. That must have been a
Yeah.
really good 2 weeks.
Do you think they knew? All right, we're going to get into our patron takes. Like we said earlier, this is the most we've ever gotten, so there's no way we're going to be able to read all of these here in the video. We're going to do as many as we can here, and there's a whole deep discussion over on it. So if you're someone who enjoys talking about Star Trek, you can go do that over on our Patreon. This is from Moonlander. When this aired, I was already enjoying Next Generation, but for me, this was when the show really stepped out of TOS's shadow and made its own mark. The final speech in Data's defense solidified me as a Picard fan. How do you feel about that? I was a fan of Picard before, but
Yeah, I like Patrick Stewart. I like Picard. I feel like he's definitely had some good moments leading up to this. But like I'm always looking for like what makes Picard Picard and not just not Kirk. I feel like this was definitely Picard's like, this is me. This is who I am. This is my speech.
yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting when people say stuff like stepping out of TOS's shadow. Maybe it's because we're so early on still in the franchise, but to me, it's just all Star Trek. Like, I don't look at it necessarily in that way. Of course, they're going to have their own flavors in each series,
Yeah.
but I wonder as we go through the series if we'll start to be more like, oh, these are each different eras of Star Trek. Because right now, I still feel like we're just watching one continuous series. It just happens to be all new actors and everything on a new show because it's 20 years later, but it feels like a continuing canon continuity. I've seen some comments like TNG almost entirely erases TOS, continuity, and it's like I don't really see that at all. Like it doesn't have to directly reference it. I still believe that it was 100 so years ago or however long it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's weird. To me, they feel like their own thing. I'm not saying like, oh, we're just gonna release anything and put it under the guise or the title of Star Trek. It feels like Star Trek. It is Star Trek, but it feels like different enough and good enough on its own. All right, this one's from Linda. Measure of a Man is what I consider to be one of the greatest Star Trek episodes, period. There are scenes in it I revisit quite often. Forget space battles and alien species. To still do its core, this episode is what Star Trek is all about. That's a take I 100% agree with. Like, I was going to bring this up earlier, but I forgot. But it's like cheesy space battles, fun, cheesy action fight scenes with obvious stunt doubles. Great. I love that stuff to death. It's fun. But this, like we've talked about it multiple times, this stuff like this, just human values issues. That's what it's all about. Under the guise of a scientific, futuristic show.
Most media that I watch, I don't look at it through a genre lens. I think you do. I do with horror because that's like intrinsic to what it is. But I don't look at Star Trek and like it because I'm a sci-fi fan. Truth be told, I'm not the biggest sci-fi fan, and you aren't either. I think they've picked that up through other stuff we've watched. But it's about using it as a medium. That doesn't necessarily mean I don't care about the space stuff, or I love goofy alien species, and I love all the weird futuristic space stuff. I mean, we're talking about an android here in this episode.
Yeah, yeah.
But at its core, yeah, it's definitely about what it does with it. So, 100% agree. I have one here from Jonathan. Many academic papers have compared this episode to City on the Edge of Forever for being a top quality early episode in a series. Do you think the comparison is fair? And which one do you think was better? That last part, I don't know if we can quite answer yet.
I don't think I can answer that one right now.
We have to revisit it.
I'm gonna have to revisit
Do you
it.
think it's a fair comparison?
Oh, I think it's a fair comparison, yeah. But I also have to keep in my mind that people always say, see, they're always saying seasons 3 to 7,
True.
the golden age of TNG. And if this one's in season 2, I can only imagine what's in seasons 3 to 7. But although we've had two, like I think at least two stellar episodes this season, where it's like not season favorites, possibly, series favorites. And this one might be one of them.
Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, City on the Edge of Forever was Alex's favorite episode of TOS. I really liked it as well. Not I liked other TOS episodes more, but it was your favorite. And I mean, just based on your raw emotional reaction to this one, I could see this one maybe being one of your favorites too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I also cried for Wrath of Khan, but that wasn't my favorite.
That definitely wasn't. Yeah, I think that it's a fair comparison in the sense, like Jonathan said, it's early on in both shows. Sitting on the Edge of Forever's towards the end of the first season of TOS.
True.
And both are kind of feel different. Like this feels different than TNG we've seen up to this point in terms of just like the content of the episode, court episode and all of that. And it's definitely going to be memorable, like Sitting on the Edge of Forever was.
Mm-hmm.
So wildly different in plot and stuff, but yeah, I agree with that take.
But in terms of just the human element and the emotions and themes, yeah, it's going to be up there.
And I will answer. I know it's tougher for you. Personally, on a first watch, I do like this more as an episode, Measure of a Man, than I did Sit on the Edge of Forever. Although it's hard to discount, Sit on the Edge of Forever probably really helped Star Trek, the original series, continue to as far as it did, and we might not have gotten anything else, after that, if it weren't for, in part, City on the Edge of Forever. So it's not my favorite episode, but I really like it, and I understand its importance. I don't know if Measure of a Man has that same importance to this show. Maybe it will. Maybe we'll look back on this one, but time will tell for us.
This one's from Bodie McBoatface. A truly great episode. The scene where they asked Data why he had the hollow image of Tasha, even though it served no function to an android, is further reminder that Data is not just a machine. Very true. It's like there's definitely something more. I don't know what Noonien Singh put in that positronic brain of his, but he's not just a machine.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's kind of what I was getting at too, with keeping that. I think him keeping that memento of Tasha is like the first concrete evidence that he's more than a machine, and has some type of soul similar to a human soul, in my opinion.
Yeah.
This one's from Dwayne. Okay, now I'm sure you guys will love this Data episode. Probably one of the best about his character so far. Is he a new life form? Yes. Another Starfleet guy you will not like. Well, maybe until the end. I have to agree, and I also wanted to bring up, um, I really love the line from Picard when he's giving his last speech in his defense, and he says, the point of Starfleet is that we're in search of new life. Well, there it sits. And referencing the fucking intro of the show is so great.
Yes, it's so amazing. I've had to bring this up as well, but there's a great scene where it's like, the camera's like back here, and it shows Picard, and it's like, "How about you?" And it's like as if he was like talking to us, like, "Ah." She was like, "Oh, sorry."
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved everything about that speech, and yeah, bringing up the intro in his defense. Oh, great.
And also Mad X continuing the trend of Starfleet
Oh yeah,
people
oh yeah.
being dicks.
At this point, I'm not surprised. As soon as I see someone else wearing a Starfleet uniform that isn't on our ship regularly and isn't an unnamed ensign, I'm just like, okay, here we go. You know what I mean? I don't get stressed about it anymore. It's like, okay, you're the antagonist. I might like you by the end of this, or you might be an alien with an awesome prosthetic that gets blown up. I don't know.
Yeah, and the moment at the end where he says he's remarkable, just one little thing, one little nitpick. I wish that uh, the judge hadn't been like, "Oh, you didn't call him it." Like she should have just, if she was gonna say anything, say like, "Oh, he," make it a little more subtle. It was a little bit spelled out.
I agree. They shouldn't have spelled it out like that. Really quick. Not really a take, but this one's from Elizabeth. We're going to court.
We're going to court.
I can't believe we've said it enough that people started saying that. That's great. We're going to court.
This one's from Patrick. A stellar episode, not just of Trek, but of television in general, with dialogue, performances, world building, and character development all coming together at their best. My question to you guys, do you find the courtroom drama to be an effective means of storytelling in Trek and elsewhere? I love courtroom
Oh,
stuff.
court is some of my favorite stuff ever. I love courtroom stuff. It's so entertaining. Star Trek can take it and like add an extra layer where like one of our favorite people is on the other side. You know what I mean? It's like I don't think I've seen that much in courtroom stuff I like. Yeah, I love court.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't have a ton of experience with being in a courtroom or anything like that. But I find just the court system, particularly of America, because that's where we live, so fascinating. Just the idea that at the end of the day, our disputes are settled just in front of usually a jury of our peers, but sometimes in this case, just a judge. And the fact that at the end of the day, everything we do as humans and in society just comes down to arguments. It just comes down to, a prosecution and a defense, and what's the best way to rule this based on evidence. I find it so compelling. And obviously, there's tragedies where things go a wrong way. And, that was evaded here in this episode, and it went the right way. But even with that being said, it's not a perfect system or a perfect way to do things, but it's by far the best way that we've got. And I just find the whole thing so fascinating. So to be able to throw sci-fi on top of that, and be able to throw, these types of philosophical arguments on top of it, I find really fascinating. Now, do I want the whole show, every episode, to be a court thing? No. But it's awesome when it shows up.
No, but court is like a timeless tool. Like one of my favorite movies, 12 Angry Men, is basically a court drama. Similar to the holodeck, similar to anything, it's a nice tool to help elevate a story when used right and sparingly.
Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite movies, Liar Liar. Definitely on the same level
Yes,
as 12 Angry Men.
Yes, exact same level. This one's from Stony D. Quote, well, there it sits. Quote, ladies and gentlemen of the target audience, Jean-Luc Picard has arrived. this sounds like Picard's coming out party for for like the character that like everyone who's seen the whole show. I'm guessing. Do they feel like Picard hasn't been here the entire like the Picard they know? Because I feel like there's definitely been some good Picard stuff beforehand, before this. But is this because that's like the second comment that brought that up? So is this like the first like Picard good speech and moment?
Yeah, I think this might be where they kind of figured it out, maybe, or where they kind of clicked for him. And if that's the case, then that bodes well for sure for the rest of the series.
Yeah, I mean they tried with the episode where Tasha Yar died, but I don't think it was on par with this Picard speech.
This is from Christina. Question: what did you think of Laveau's final thoughts on the case? Personally, I found it a little out of character for Star Trek to throw in the religious concept of a soul as being the key point to determine Data's status as a life form. Maybe it was a function of the time this was made, but I would have preferred a different take, particularly after Picard's eloquent speech. Um, that's interesting because I don't take soul as inherently religious. I think anyone who I think even an atheist would find it hard to argue that humans have a soul in a maybe not in a literal sense, but in a colloquial sense, in the sense that there is something about us that makes us a human with a soul. That doesn't mean that a higher power implants, a soul into all of us. That doesn't have to be what it means. It just means that we are more than just the physical bodies that we inhabit. I think that's true even if you don't believe in anything outside of our current state of physical being. It doesn't have to be necessarily a god or anything like that.
Yeah, soul sounds like a very religious word. Like, oh, your soul as it floats up. It's like there's obviously something that separates us from most of the common animals out there. Like, there's definitely that extra, I don't know what it is, but that extra, it's like, yeah, there's something special going on here. But I feel like soul is the best word to describe it, besides self awareness, I guess. But not every human is self aware, as we know. Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
I was hoping you would, laugh at that. Yeah,
Yeah.
like no, I thought like her resolution was like I don't think it was out of character. I just feel like that's it's I would react like that. Like how do I know I have like who am I to judge?
Yeah, it reminds me of Picard's speech a few episodes ago when he gets asked about death and he says, I don't know what's after death, but it has to be something. And it's kind of similar, right? Like only humans think about that. And what is our soul? I find it easy to believe that centuries from now, regardless of what information we all come across Greek gods or whatever else out in space, we'll still have that same question because it's literally the one thing no one will know until you get there. And once you're there, you can't tell anybody else. So,
Yeah, I feel like as long as humanity is alive, I mean, since humanity's been alive, they've all had that same question because it's never been answered, and it's going to continue. No matter how far we advance, we grow extra arms, we grow green, and we turn in we look like alien. You're like, what comes after? That's always going to be there.
all right. So, with all this praise that we've given the episode, I think it's only fair for us to read a patron take with a dissenting opinion.
Okay.
This one is from Evan. Very unpopular opinion, but this episode just isn't very compelling to me. Data's status as an independent life form was affirmed when they admitted him to Starfleet, and that should have been the end of it. They ignore that and instead make some fairly convincing arguments to the contrary. With how advanced computers are in the 24th century, Data really is just a few steps above the Enterprise computer, and sentience is very subjective. The fact that Maddox is portrayed as slimy doesn't make his arguments less valid. The final argument of, you can't prove he's not sentient, feels limp. You can't prove he's not sentient. That's an
Yeah,
interesting one.
yeah. I mean, we've talked about this, like the whole like, why is it like as far as they've gone, they've literally gone to space, time traveled. Why is it so hard for, and why is it so uncommon for like androids to be as popular as they should be by that time? And as you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
why is they? I think we've always questioned that. I mean, yeah. I mean, Maddox does bring up some good points, but I do feel like the resolution, like, is the point. Like, we're we're two levels. It's the same. Like, yeah, we're different, but it's like, okay, you were created by Dr. Noonien soon. I was created by my parent. You know what I mean? Like, that's the the whole point at the end.
What I'll agree with is kind of what I said earlier in the sense that that's why nothing about Riker's argument really convinced me, because they never attack Data's sentience. They
True.
keep saying it's a machine, it's a machine.
Mm-hmm.
But at no point do they deny that he does have intelligence, self-awareness, and consciousness. So when Picard comes in with that, it's a slam dunk because there's no argument they've presented against it. With that being said, that doesn't make the episode not compelling to me, because the idea is what's compelling, and how it plays out in the episode I find very compelling.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I didn't find the prosecution's argument super compelling, the whole episode themes, idea, and how it plays out in general, I still found very compelling.
Yeah, if Riker like attacked Data's weaknesses that we know from watching the show, like I don't know, asked him about a joke or something, explain a joke, or
bring up the poker.
Bring up the poker game.
Yeah,
that might be tough to convey.
Like, he clearly doesn't understand the human experience. He doesn't even understand why this and this and this. That could have been a stronger argument, I think.
Yeah, but the crime isn't being human, or not being human. It's not being sentient, because there's aliens that work in Starfleet. So
yeah, it's a lot of gray area.
A lot of gray area.
But I've still found the episode compelling nonetheless, and I also believe it's probably one of the best so far we've seen. So that's how we feel on it.
Yeah, it's gonna be the longest one, I feel. We still have to talk about another episode.
Yeah, we still have to talk about another episode.
So.